August 15th is the birthday of the independent and sovereign state of Pakistan. It marks the fulfillment of the destiny of the Muslim nation. Our object should be peace within and peace without.
Since Pakistan's founding as a Muslim nation in the traumatic partition of British India, it's endured ethnic, political, and religious conflicts over national identity. It's fought a series of wars with India. It's seen decades of undemocratic military rule, and it's felt the persistent weight of poverty. Today, nuclear
To me, it's Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I think that's key. There's a regional requirement here to focus, as far as I'm concerned, to include India as well in getting this right in the future. The focus on defeating al-Qaeda is the principal focus here and the main goal. It requires the elimination of the safe haven in Pakistan, but it also requires conditions get developed in Afghanistan to the point where that safe haven that was there in 2001, 2002 can't return.
You're talking about a country of 175, 180 million people. You're talking about nuclear weapons. You're talking about religious extremism. You're talking about terrorist cells. You're talking about a situation that the world has a real vested interest in making sure that it holds together and progresses as opposed to falls apart.
The adage that growth will lift people from poverty didn't really play itself out in Pakistan. You saw an increase in the gap between rich and poor, extremely high rates of inflation, I believe 20% in 2009, and already in 2010 are seeing rates of about 13%. So for the low-income populations, it's difficult even to buy a loaf of bread or milk. And so within Pakistan, it's impossible to look at just a single economy, but rather we need to look at the micro level, really, at how different regions, different sectors are experiencing completely different kinds of economic realities.
The Pakistani economy faces 3 or 4
If you look at Pakistan's politics and you look at the political leaders who have existed in the country for decades now, you'll see remarkable continuity, and you'll see similar names, family names, coming up again and again. And this reflects the fact that Pakistani politics are dominated by a relatively narrow elite within a broad society, and that narrow elite is not just in charge of civilian politics, but in fact their control extends over many aspects of Pakistani society.
It is kind of caught in a rut with the leadership of this feudal class, and to some extent an industrial class, which has a grip on the population. And then add to this
Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founding father of Pakistan, Pakistan's first Governor General, his ideas and his politics and his vision is very important for understanding where Pakistan stands today.
The real challenge for Jinnah was to figure out how to define an Islamic state, how to reconcile Islamic values and ideals and morals with the necessities of a modern constitutional democratic state. That tension, that contradiction, if you will, that Jinnah faced is today the same tension, the same contradiction that Pakistanis face as they try to define what it means to be an Islamic state in the 21st century.
Today, what we are seeing is far greater religiosity.
TNSM is a group that was founded by a guy named Sufi Muhammad in the mid-1980s. He broke away from a mainstream Pakistani Islamist political party and essentially wanted to advocate for the imposition of Sharia in Pakistan. And at first that was simply a political movement, but eventually he took more and more confrontational stances against the Pakistani state. The subtext here is that the Pakistani constitution says Pakistan is founded as an Islamic state whose laws will always be consistent with Sharia. So there is this notion ingrained in the very founding of Pakistan that it is supposed to be an Islamic state. There are a variety of groups over time that have said, no, we're not living up to that promise, and TNSM was one of these. Sufi Muhammad
Pakistan cannot escape its geography because it lives in a very tough neighborhood in a very strategic location. On the one hand, India, which is a burgeoning economic and political power. On the other hand, Afghanistan and Central Asia with their challenges. And then Iran, now a budding nuclear prospect.
What you see is a region of interconnected competition and rivalry. If Pakistan persists with its status quo, then it means we're not likely to see significant political reform. We'll probably continue to see a certain degree of tension and conflict with India. We'll see relatively slow economic growth, and we won't see considerable political, social revolution of any sort.
The likelihood that Pakistan will stay the course of muddling through, experiencing some modicum of success with a persistent risk of failure, is extremely high. It is the dominant outcome for Pakistan's future, at least over the next decade, and possibly even beyond.
An authoritarian state is one in which the military leadership of Pakistan reasserts its control over institutions. In order to do so, it finds that it needs to use far more repressive measures to quell dissent. And in the process, it may form alliances, political alliances, in that repression with Islamist parties as a means to work against opposition forces and to keep control over a state that in the past has shown it's very difficult for the military to have a firm grip upon.
Well, an authoritarian state has been present in Pakistan for more than half of its existence, so forecasting that possibility doesn't seem like a great leap of faith. At the moment, the international community has created
an Islamist state is a scenario in which Pakistan veers more radically towards extreme ideologies, where its leadership is more likely to embrace Islamist attitudes and views, and that changes their strategic outlook in the region. It's a country in which Islamist parties are likely to become more dominant, and in the worst possible case, an Islamist state assumes the possibility that you could have a radical takeover of the government in place of what exists now in the way of a military and civilian leadership.
Pakistan's already been through that scenario. It already was a hardline Islamic state in the 1980s under Zia-ul-Haq. It was closely aligned with Saudi Arabia. That scenario.
A moderate state is a scenario in which Pakistan pursues some gradual improvements in the quality of its governance, in its opening to the world, in its relationship with India, and finds a stable or more effective balance between civilians and military in charge of the country. It's a country where you'll see economic growth and gradual move for many Pakistanis out of poverty and into something that looks more like a middle-class, sustainable economic future.
The likeliest scenario for Pakistan, in my opinion, is that it has hit the bottom and will now begin to improve in